I am Richard Owen from the University of Glamorgan, and the first lecture is going to be on the historical development of the European community and the theories of integration that have underpinned its development. Now, pressure for European integration started after the end of the Second World War, and the two main reasons for the impetus towards European integration were that there had been three conflicts in Europe in less than 100 years: the Franco-Prussian War, the First World War, and the Second World War. And there was a strong upswell of opinion wanting to prevent further conflict in Europe, and also fears of Soviet expansionism, and that made Western Europe act more cohesively. The person who got the ball rolling was the former, at the time, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who in a speech in Zurich in 1946 said he wanted to create a United States of Europe. Now, in the late 1940s, opinion was very much divided between those who wanted to take an intergovernmentalist direction and those who wanted to take a more federalist direction. Now, intergovernmentalist international organisations do not involve any transfer of sovereignty to the international organisation. The other major characteristics of an intergovernmentalist organisation would be that it has a weak secretariat, and also its decisions are implemented by national governments. A federalist organisation would involve political and economic union. Now, the first attempt at European integration was the formation of the Council of Europe, which still exists but is not part of the European Union. Although the European Union members belong to the Council of Europe, other member states belong to that as well. The Council of Europe was set up in 1949, and it was very much an intergovernmentalist organisation. Now, the next significant development was the 9th of May 1950, when we had the so-called Schuman Plan, or the Schuman Declaration. This was significant because the French Foreign Minister at the time, Robert Schuman, called for European integration with reconciliation between France and Germany at its core. The political significance of this was that after the Second World War, the erstwhile allies, the United States, United Kingdom on the one hand, and France on the other, took a very different view as to their policy towards Germany. The UK and the US wished to rebuild Germany and keep a strong country at the centre of Europe as a bulwark against Soviet expansionism, whereas French foreign policy was designed between 1945 and 1950 to keep Germany weak, to prevent further attack from Germany. Now, the Schuman Plan represented a U-turn in French foreign policy, and Robert Schuman said that the coal and steel industries of Europe should be put under European control, starting with France and Germany, but that other countries could participate as well. This was of great political and military significance because there were coal fields that were still disputed between France and Germany, so conditions looked ripe for further conflict between the two countries. The innovation in this institution in terms of its legal structure was that there was going to be a degree of international, or we used to call supranational, control of the coal and steel industries. So it would no longer be regarded as German and French coal and steel industries, but they would be under European control. And in this way, they thought they could prevent further conflict. It led eventually to the European Coal and Steel Community. And of all the treaties and communities we will look at today, the European Coal and Steel Community, the Treaty of Paris, was the only treaty of limited duration, and it in fact ceased to exist in 2002, and its functions were then taken over by the European Community. Now, the European Coal and Steel Community created a common market when it came to coal and steel products. So 6 countries joined the European Coal and Steel Community from its inception. They were France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium and Luxembourg. The United Kingdom was asked to join but decided not to do so. And the main functions of the European coal and steel community were that coal and steel products could move freely around these 6 countries as if the borders didn't exist. But where it was truly innovative was in its institutional structure. It set up a high authority, which became eventually known as the Commission, which was independent of national governments and regulated the coal and steel industries, although the way it regulated was strictly prescribed by the European coal and steel community. So this idea of a high authority, of people independent of their national governments, was very innovative in terms of international organisations. So you had an institution that was not under the control of national governments, that had a major role in regulating the coal and steel industries. The national voice did have its say. There was a council of ministers consisting of government representatives. There was also an assembly, which consisted in those days of delegates from national parliaments to an assembly, as well as a court of justice, which again was independent of national control, which would adjudicate on whether or not the member states had complied with the rules of this community. This was regarded as a remarkable success at the time and very much encouraged moves towards European integration, perhaps almost too much so, because the European Defence Community Treaty was then agreed, which was a remarkable political achievement when you consider that less than 10 years after the end of the Second World War, France and Germany agreed a European Defence Community, and they also agreed a European Political Community Treaty at the same time. However, these treaties never came into force because the European Defence Community Treaty was rejected by the French National Assembly. It was perhaps too much for French public opinion to contemplate a European Defence Community Treaty less than 10 years after the end of the Second World War. And the European Political Community Treaty died with it. So they rethought then the process of European integration, whereas the European Coal and Steel Community was a functionalist treaty, its thinking being that you would integrate sector by sector. So you take coal and steel first, then another sector, let's just say the car-making sector, then you move on to another sector, and another sector until you had full economic integration. What eventually became known as the European Community Treaty took a different approach towards integration, and it integrated types of economic activity. So it attempted to create, out of 6 countries, one trading bloc. So in trading terms, these 6 countries became one trading bloc, but they stayed as 6 political entities. So still 6 political units, but in terms of trade, they became one trading bloc. So the Treaty of Rome, 1957, what used to be known as the European Economic Community Treaty, eventually amended and its name changed to the European Community Treaty, integrated types of economic activity, try to integrate trade. It had in a non-binding preamble to the Treaty of Rome, they said they were setting up an ever closer